Hello pipe organ friends, thank you for joining me in the workshop today. I'm not out repairing a pipe organ at the moment, so this video is going to be slightly different, but hopefully you'll find it interesting. What I've got here on the bench is a selection of different organ pipes. There's generally known as 4 families of different types of organ pipes, different sounds. The first one are the reeds. I don't have any reeds here today, so we're not going to look at those. Then we've got some flutes, then we've got diapasons, and then the final family are the strings. And what I thought I'd do today is have a look at these different organ pipe families and have a look at the harmonic content of the pipes that they produce, the sound that they produce, and see what the difference is between the different pipes and why they sound differently. So here we have an open flute, kind of the most simple kind of pipe you could expect, you could get. But none of these pipes produce a sound wave that's a pure sine wave. They all produce the main note of the pipe, but they also produce notes that are harmonics of it. So the wavelength could be half the wavelength of the pipe, or it could be a third, a quarter, a fifth, etc., etc. And they produce those different harmonics in different amounts, different volumes, and that's what produces the different tone of the organ pipe, of different types of organ pipes, or the different tone of any musical instrument. So we can have a look today at those different harmonics available, present in different pipes. And to do that, on the laptop here I've just got a frequency analyzer from a website on the internet, and it's listening to the microphone and it's displaying what frequencies are present in the sound that's being produced. So at the moment it's my voice, it's making that noise, but we can also do it with organ pipes. So let's have a look, and we'll start at the flutes and then move to the diapasons and then finally onto the strings. So this here is an open flute. I think you'd probably call it a hall flute. We can see the top's open, it's got a shade for tuning, and the bottom on this one is a hall flute because it's got an inverted mouth, so the slope goes inwards where normally you'd expect the normal mouth to go outwards, like on this pipe here. So we'll start by having a look at the hall flute. It's got a reputation, the hall flute, for having quite a dull, dead tone, so we'll see what that means on the frequency analyzer. So if I have a go. And we can see on screen the different harmonics available in this tone. If we pause the video for a moment, we can investigate what's shown on screen in a bit more detail. At the bottom we can see the waveform being recorded by the microphone, and you'll notice that it's quite similar to a sine wave, so it's quite pure. The top half of the screen shows us the frequency analysis of this waveform. We can see that the highest peak is at 0.28 kHz. This is the fundamental note of the pipe. We have a second peak at about twice that frequency, 0.56 kHz, and so that would be the next harmonic, so an octave higher, and we can see that that's a bit weaker than the fundamental. And then we can see we've also got harmonics at 0.8 kHz and 1.08 kHz, the second and third harmonics, and there's a couple more. If next we move on to another flute, instead of being an open flute, this one is a stopped flute. So you might call it a gedakt or a raw flute or something like that. So we'll have a look at what that does to the tone and the different harmonics available in that pipe. Firstly, looking at the waveform at the bottom of the screen, we can see it's much more like a square waveform than the sinusoidal wave that we saw with the whole flute. If we look at the frequency spectrum shown at the top of the screen, we can see that it's quite different from the open pipe. The stopped pipe only really has the odd-numbered harmonics. You can see that the octave above the fundamental tone of about 0.5 kHz has hardly any peak, and similarly there's a gap between the 0.75 kHz peak and the 1.27 kHz peak. This is because the stop pipe only allows the development of the odd-numbered harmonics. One thing you might note about this flute, notice it's got a hole in the stopper, so you could call it a chimney flute. It's a kind of class of stop pipe, and we'll have a look at how that impacts on the sound. So I'm going to play it with the stopper uncovered, and then I'm going to put my finger over the stopper and we'll see what happens. So it sounds like the note gets lower when we put our finger on it, but looking at the frequency analysis we can see the fundamental stays at the same pitch. It's just the harmonics available in this pipe are reduced when we don't have this chimney in it. And this is the reason why if you have an open flute like a clarabella, you might have the bass end of it as a stopped flute to make the pipe smaller to save space. And often you'll find the intermediate pipes, so the first of the stop pipes, will be chimneyed like this, and that's to adjust the tone to make it a bit more like an open pipe, and kind of smooth out the difference between the stop pipes and the open pipes. Next we're going to go on to the diapasons. So here we have, I think it's actually marked as a principal, this pipe here. It's your kind of classic organ pipe, you can see. So let's just have a blow on it and see what it sounds like. So there we go, that's a classic organ sound. It's got a bit more going on than a flute. And if we look at the signal on the frequency analyzer, we'll see that we've got a lot more of the higher harmonics coming through, giving it that slightly stringy-ish tone, but not as much as we'd expect from a full string. So that's the diapasons for us. So now we'll move on to our strings, and I've got 3 different strings here for us to look at. The first one here is a dulciana. If we compare it to our principal, we can see that it's about the same length, this pipe, but it's much narrower, it's much thinner, narrower scale for the dulciana, and also the mouth height is lower than on the principal. So we can see that for a dulciana, and all these strings, they are quite narrow and have low mouths, and that's to kind of get the stringy sound, whereas the flutes don't with the stringy sound, they've got relatively high mouths. So we'll have a go on the dulciana and see what happens with that. If we compare the frequency spectrum from this dulciana to that of the open diapason, we will notice it has a similar number of harmonics showing, but the volume of the harmonics is much higher. The second peak is very nearly the same volume as the fundamental tone. We can do the similar thing with the next one, which is called a solitional. So it's very similar to the dulciana. The solitional is stringier than the dulciana, and we can see this in the frequency analysis, where the second peak, the octave above the fundamental, is actually louder than the fundamental tone. And then finally we'll move on to the gamba. This one happens to be spotted metal, and it's got a bridge over the mouth, and we'll see what's going on with this one. So it's got even more harmonics, huge number of harmonics coming through on this one, and that's what gives it its fizzy, stringy sound. Often organ pipes, different stops are used in combination, they're not just used on their own, so we can have a look at that. So here we've got the principal, we can call this our 8-foot open diapason. We can play it on its own, but also we could add, say, a 4-foot an octave above it. So we'd have an open diapason and we'd have a 4-foot principal, and we can play those together and see how they interact. They might not be quite in tune. And then if we wanted to brighten the sound up even more, maybe we'd add a 2-foot. So that would be we've got the fundamental, the first harmonic, the octave above a second harmonic, and then an octave above that the 4th harmonic. So play those. It's not very much in tune. There we go. And we could keep adding harmonics. So in between the 4-foot and the 2-foot, we could have a 3rd harmonic, and this would be a 2 2/3, so a mutation stop known as a nazard, or a 12th. So we've got a 4-foot, the 12th, and the 15th. So we could add that in the middle. So that's our fundamental, our first harmonic, second harmonic, third harmonic, and then we've got another, we could add our next harmonicas along, and that would be a 1 3/5 stop, length stop, if that was a stop, and that would be a tierce or a 17th. And those who know their pipe organs may recognise this combination of these 5 different pipe lengths. The first 5, your harmonic series, is known as a cornet or a cornet. So we'll have a go at playing that. I might not have much puff to play it for very long though. Here we go. It made some noise, but I don't think it's voiced very properly with them all working together. But that's the principle. So a bit of a different video this time. Hopefully you've enjoyed it and learnt something useful. We'll be back to repairing pipe organs again next time. So if you haven't subscribed already, please do subscribe to find our next videos. And if you could add a like if you enjoyed this video, that would help us too. Thanks very much for watching. Bye.